What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And today I am yet again going to be talking about The Bad Batch. But you may have noticed that this is not the typical formula for one of my Bad Batch reviews, because rather than talking about the most recent 3 episodes, I will instead be talking about the most recent 4 episodes. And that is because episodes 7 and 8, and 9 and 10 of The Bad Batch Season 2 essentially operate as 2-part arcs, so I figured I may as well double up and talk about all 4 of these episodes in the same video. The format will return to normal after this point because there are 6 episodes left in this season, which means I will return to doing videos in 3-episode chunks. But without further ado, let's start talking about episodes 7 and 8, The Clone Conspiracy and Truth and Consequences. These episodes, especially the first of the 2, The Clone Conspiracy, felt very reminiscent of some of the more politically focused arcs from the Clone Wars. In particular, Padme's pursuit of peace in Season 3, and Fives and the Inhibitor Chip Conspiracy in Season 6. We follow Senator Ryo Chuchi as she fights for the rights of the clones and tries to prevent the Senate from voting for the Defense Recruitment Bill, which will essentially put the clones out of a job and leave them purposeless, which is something that I love about these 2 episodes, how they connect back to the theme of purpose, which has permeated throughout this entire show and which was first introduced at the very end of the Clone Wars when Rex says this.
I've known no other way. It gives us clones all a mixed feeling about the war. Many people wish it never happened. But without it, we clones wouldn't exist.
The Bad Batch have been attempting to discover their purpose since the beginning of this show. As Crosshair put it at the end of Season 1, they are currently drifting through the galaxy, a galaxy which is experiencing turbulent change. After being rescued from Skako Minor, Echo thought that his purpose lay with the Bad Batch. But by the end of this arc, he feels that his duty is to help Rex in assisting other displaced clones across the galaxy. We have seen countless clones wake up to the fact that the Empire is not the same as the Republic they used to serve. We first saw this in Season 1, with Captain Hauser trying to convince all of his brothers that what they were being asked to do was wrong. We also saw this with Commander Cody earlier in this season, him being uncomfortable with what the Empire was asking him, Crosshair, and all the other clones to do. And this 2-episode arc is kickstarted by one of the clones who was present on Admiral Rampart's Venator, wanting to come forward with the information that the destruction of Kamino was not an accident, shortly before he is executed by an assassin who we learn is also a clone who refers to himself as a believer. A believer in what is the question. Senator Chuchi visits a bar of clones who claim that they just want to be out there fighting insurgents. Their ideals don't necessarily align with that of the Empire, but all they want to do is fight, because they weren't programmed to do anything else or to think for themselves. Which brings us back to the tragedy of the clones. Their purpose from the very beginning was to be disposed of. Just like so many other countless characters, they were simply a piece on Palpatine's galactic chessboard. This is confirmed to us at the end of this arc, when Palpatine is able to use the set of circumstances he put in place for the clones to incriminate them, by saying that their willingness to unquestioningly follow orders should encourage people to support the Defense Recruitment Bill. But we know that the only reason the clones so blindly follow orders is because of the inhibitor chips that he had planted in their brains. But of course the general public doesn't know that, and Palpatine's very persuasive way of speaking goes a long way in swaying the masses. As he is being arrested, Admiral Rampart repeats the mantra that we have heard uttered by many clones, that he was following orders. which we know to be true. The order to bombard Camino was given to him directly by Tarkin, who, as we know, is in close connection with Palpatine. I wouldn't be surprised if Palpatine had this planned out and had intended to frame Rampart from the beginning to ensure that the clones were permanently disposed of so the Stormtrooper program could begin. Rampart played a relatively small role in Season 1, but it seemed like they were building him up to play the role of a more active antagonist in Season 2, which is why I did not expect Palpatine to rise up out of the floor of the Senate chamber accompanied by eerie choral music, making Rampart look like an insolent child by comparison. Only halfway through this season, and who we thought to be the primary antagonist has been completely removed from the picture. And that's brilliant writing, in my opinion. They were able to set up certain stakes and consequences for our characters. They led us to believe that they may not be successful, only for the Bad Batch to come through in the end with the evidence needed to convict Admiral Rampart for his crimes, only for him to be eclipsed by the biggest bad of them all, which is a reminder to not just us, the audience, but also the characters within the show, that they're only a small part of a massive galaxy. As the title, Truth and Consequences, would imply, the Bad Batch were able to bring the truth to light, but it had disastrous consequences, which will continue to have a ripple effect on not only the galaxy as a whole, but especially the clones. And this was yet another episode with standout music, in my opinion. As Palpatine's speech draws to a close, we hear a very small piece of Anakin's dark deeds from Revenge of the Sith, which, if I'm not mistaken, also underscores Palpatine's speech in that film, which gives this scene some very appropriate musical cohesion with that very similar scene from Revenge of the Sith. I also love that at the end of the episode, as Echo is watching the Bad Batch fly away, we hear the theme that is representative of the clones interlaced with the Bad Batch's theme, which reflects how Echo is torn between his commitment to the family he has forged with the Bad Batch and what he feels is his moral obligation to help the rest of the clones who he used to serve alongside. Moving on to episodes 9 and 10, The Crossing and Retrieval, the Bad Batch are sent on a mission by Sid to retrieve some of this mineral known as Ipsium. However, their ship is stolen, and the dangerous weather conditions of the planet force them to take refuge within a mine. And the first episode of this arc really serves to further develop the dynamic between Tech and Omega in a similar way that the first two episodes of this season developed the relationship between Echo and Omega. This episode reminded me a great deal of the episode following Kanan's death from Star Wars Rebels Season 4. That episode showed us the effect that Kanan's death had on the rest of the Ghost crew, and this episode serves a similar purpose by showing us the effect that Echo's absence is having on the rest of the Bad Batch, not only on their coordination skills and ability to work as a team, but also on an emotional level. For the second time in this season, Tech is called out for being the most emotionally cold of the team, which leads to some conflict once Omega shows her frustration over Echo leaving and their ship being stolen. She feels as though everything they value is being ripped away from them, and the way that Tech responds to this is essentially by asking her what her problem is. Hunter and Wrecker encourage Tech to go apologize to Omega, and after some antics ensue, the two are given some time to reconcile, and we are treated to a fantastic scene where they have an introspective conversation about life and change. Tech says that he finds it difficult to care about change because it's a fundamental part of life. There will be difficult times in life, but we must always find a way to persevere. As Tech says, that is what soldiers do. But Omega responds to this by saying they're not just soldiers, or a squad even. They're a family. Tech takes a moment to consider this, and for the first time in this season, I actually got a bit choked up, as Tech says, "I may process thoughts and moments differently, but it doesn't mean I feel any less than you." And I find that line very powerful, because it's true to life. We all have a different way of processing things, and the best we can do is be respectful and understanding of that. We also begin to see the payoff of the seeds that were planted for Sid's betrayal back in episode 4. After the Bad Batch escape from the mine, they contact Sid, and she initially refuses to help them, but once Omega interjects, she reluctantly agrees, which I find quite interesting. When the chips are down, it seems that most of the Bad Batch matter very little to Sid, but Omega seems to be her weak spot, and I wonder why that is. Perhaps she sees some of her younger self in Omega. Either way, by the end of the 10th episode, she has made no effort to reach the Bad Batch in any way, so I'm sure they'll have some choice words for her once they make it back to Ord Mantell. Episode 10 was pretty simple, but I still liked it. We learned that the thief who stole their ship is just a boy who happens to share the same name as me, and he and several other children are working for the disgusting gluttonous pig known as Mako, who is lying to these children, hoarding all the food and rations for himself while he essentially uses them for slave labor. All this poor kid gets for bringing Mako the Bad Batch's ship is half a canteen of water. In a way, these children aren't that much different than the Bad Batch. They're all just trying to get by in a galaxy that is full of evil and corruption. But for as much evil and corruption as there is in this galaxy, there will always be people out there like the Bad Batch who are willing to stick up for what's right, and that is essentially what Tech says at the end of the episode. I'm sure this experience will help personalize these conflicts for the Bad Batch. As Omega says, the Empire isn't the only threat. There are smaller threats all across the galaxy, and I feel like this is an affirmation of the fact that this is the Bad Batch's new purpose, helping those in need and facing down these smaller threats. I'm sure some people will complain about this little 2-episode arc for not contributing to the overarching story, but if you ask me, that's kind of the point. As previously stated, the Bad Batch are only a small part of a massive galaxy, and these 2 episodes bring things back to a ground level after the huge galaxy-shifting events that occurred in the 7th and 8th episodes. I'm glad that the Bad Batch is the type of show which can take a step back to explore characters and their relationships with each other in a meaningful way. In regards to what I'm hoping for in the rest of this season, I obviously hope we see Crosshair again, which I feel will inevitably happen pretty soon, but I'm also wondering if we're ever going to catch up with Nala Se and what's going on with her. Because if you think about it, she's the entire reason the Bad Batch were able to make it off Kamino in the first place, and the final scene of the first season was focused on her, so I wonder if we're ever going to cut back to that, or if, as some people have suggested, they'll include that in The Mandalorian, which I am dreading the possibility of. But with all that said, that's pretty much it for my review of the most recent 4 episodes, or most recent 2 arcs of The Bad Batch Season 2. You guys let me know, what are your thoughts on these episodes? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Just whatever your thoughts are. Please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.